If you have a pet, you're a lucky person. And if you give all the joy and love that you can to your pet, you're a special person. There's a way that pets help keep us humble and humane, and it touches both the masculine and the feminine within our nature. I don't know if you have a parakeet or a cockatoo or a cockatiel or a dog or a cat or fish or horse, whatever you have. It can be healthier, it can live longer. I'm Gary Knoll. I'd like to welcome you to a very special presentation on natural pet health. It'll be a fun journey. And the payoff at the end is that you might have a dog with you twice as long, or a cat, as you otherwise would have, without having to pay enormous vet bills. And even the question and controversy around vaccines. Should you automatically vaccine for whatever the vet says? Maybe not. We'll explore that as well. Join me now. How would you ideally feed your horse?
My rule of thumb is as much grass or hay as they can have, and then if they need more for their energy levels to be high enough for their activity, then a good quality plain grain diet with individualized nutraceutical supplementation.
A horse is a grazing animal. Its diet should consist mostly of grasses, and if he is not in heavy work, if his weight is good, you don't really need to feed grain. However, we are doing things with our horses that they wouldn't do in nature. We're working them harder, we're racing them, so we need to feed them a grain supplement. It should never be fed as the primary diet. Now, of course, grass in the pasture is the best diet for a horse. But in the winter, we have to feed hay. There's alfalfa, which is basically a legume. It's high in protein. And there's a timothy, which is a grass hay, orchard grass, and a mix of those. You can tell a good bale by looking at it. It's nice and soft. It's green. It has a nice smell to it. It's free of mold and free of dust. Some people, especially on the West Coast where hay is very scarce, they'll feed cubes. Cubes, though, I find is not the best diet alone. The horses need the long stem grasses in order to keep their digestive system moving. And then we're going to feed grains. Now, of course, the classic grain is oats, whole oats, crimped oats, steamed oats. Barley is used a lot lately, and then there's corn, which is readily available. Now, whole corn is hard for a horse to digest. Chopped corn is much better. You have to be careful of mold. It tends to go bad much easier. One thing that's not traditionally fed is flaxseed. Flaxseed is generally cooked and keeps a horse's digestive system moving. Now, I feed some soybean meal to make sure my horses get enough protein. Rice bran is a newer thing. I've only heard about it in the last few years. It's mostly a high source of fat. It's rather expensive. It's more of a concentrate. It's fed the horses who need to gain weight. And this is wheat bran. Now, wheat bran is always served with hot water, and then it's served as a laxative in the winter when the horse is eating mostly dried food and nothing really succulent. Traditionally, you'll see in most barns a sweet feed. I don't use it myself too much for a couple of reasons. I find it has molasses on it that serves as a binding agent. Horses do love the taste, but I find molasses gets my horses a little too revved up.
We must keep in mind that with sweet feed, because there is molasses, a natural sweetener, it's prone to bacterial overgrowth. And you must be careful. Don't buy humongous quantities of these grains and just put them out, because if you don't watch the temperature of the barn or the storage area, aflatoxins, which are molds, can grow, and these spores are extremely toxic to animals. So we don't want your animal suffering from some form of bacterial overgrowth.
That's very true, Gary, and because of that, a lot of companies add preservatives, which I don't also want in my horse's food. I found ethoxyquin, BHA, BHT, which for the same reasons we don't want them in our diet, we certainly don't want them in our horse's diet. Of course, horses always love vegetables, especially anything sweet. Little carrots, you can give your horses large carrots, as much of that as possible. I feed more carrots in the winter just to give them something succulent, something with fresh enzymes in it. Horses also love apples, any kind of fruits, of course. Take the pits out of the peaches and the plums. Cherries, well, I've never tried that. That's a little too hard to de-pit. I feed my horses garlic on a daily basis. Mostly chopped garlic because it's convenient and it mixes well with the food. It detoxifies them, helps their blood.
Good information. Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
What are the types of fish food that are available?
Well, there's some commercially prepared products. Find out what kind of products your fish like. Some fish like vegetable matter. So you may have to incorporate more vegetable matter, such as nuri, which you can buy in the local market, seaweed, and clip that in the tank on a feeding clip. Also, you can use something like romaine lettuce. Clip that on a clip and stick it in the tank. Fish love it. Many hobbyists raise their own natural food, such as microworms or brine shrimp, and these work very well.
When feeding fish, people don't always know how much to feed.
That's
How
a big
often?
problem, especially when they go on vacation. Feed as much as they consume within 5 minutes, not more. Do that once a day. After a while, you can do it twice a day, no more than that. Just a pinch, let them consume it all. If you see you have food on the bottom after that time, you fed too much, feed less. If you skip a day now and then, that's all right too. If you go away for a weekend, fish won't die, they'll survive. In nature, they don't eat every day.
Dr. Young, we have a lot of bird lovers, and they're almost always buying processed bird feed. What's wrong with the commercial bird feed on the market, and how would you suggest that you feed your bird?
Well, of course, my main thrust is the medical end of it, and particularly the homeopathic medical end of it. I'm not exactly the greatest husbandman in the world, but I do know certain things. That the food that's on the shelves in the majority of shops around the country is not rotated the way it should be. And as a result, the food sits there and loses whatever nutrient ability or effect that it had in the first place. So by the time you get around to buying something that's been there pushed in the back for 6 months, it isn't worth much. That's number one. Number two, all of the foods that I know of, the popular foods that I know of, are heat processed and absolutely destroys everything that's in the food that's initially intended to give the bird a good nutritive state. So number one, I suspect that there are certain bird foods out there that you can research particularly with a veterinarian who does bird practice. I don't want to mention any particular companies, but there are several companies out there that produce foods that are not desecrated by heat processing. And also the fact that, see, people, when they feed their birds, they don't realize that birds, now you're a bird fancier, you're not, so maybe you'll say, well, Dr. Young, you're wrong, but I feel that birds don't eat by what it tastes like, they eat by what it looks like. And birds can actually become fearful of food because it doesn't look right to them. So it's important that birds have many, many kinds of fresh fruits and vegetables available to them in all their little containers all around the cage, and they're changed all the time. And I will tell you something that I notice, I really see this all the time, is the lack of hygiene with birds. People don't clean the cages like they should. The same thing goes, incidentally folks, the same thing goes with cat litter boxes, which get changed maybe once a week, maybe twice a week. Who would want to have a powder room in their home that was the practice? Nobody would, it would be just terrible. But they expect that their animals are going to get along being faced with this contamination on a daily basis. And the birds are the same. The perches, which never get washed off, which come into our hospital caked with excrement, and old food just sitting there, old food. So, and once again, fresh water. The water has to be changed every day, and bottled water at that, given what we're dealing with in the tap waters today. So, fresh water, hygiene, fresh foods, fresh fruits, fresh vegetables. You see the word fresh, not processed. And those foods that are processed by the several companies that I'm aware of, they're cold processed. They're not heat processed. And there lies the secret.
That's a lot of good information. A few extra things that I have found work for the birds that I have. I take the fruits, like grapes and piece of apple, and any fruit that you have in season, and you put it on a chain, because I find that birds like to go to a perch and eat off something that's hanging. Giving fresh, not tap water. I don't give dogs, cats, or any animals tap water because it's polluted. On my ranch, of course, I have mineral water from the deep minerals, and that's terrific, and you should either use bottled water or mineral water. And I change the water every day, and take hydrogen peroxide, or you can take a bleach, diluted, and you clean the cage, and you clean all the surface, because that's where the bacteria and viruses and parasites exist. And when you do that, you'll frequently clean up the hygiene so well that they're not suffering from upper respiratory infections or parasite infections. Parasites are so common in animals. I've had buffaloes, I've had Scottish Highlander cattle and eland and elk and nilgai on my ranch down in Texas when I had that. And the number one problem we had was parasites. So you had to keep it all clean. So cleaning it regularly is important. Fresh fruits and vegetables important, taking carrots and broccoli and things that they would find in the wild.
I love talking about how to care for a bird because there's so very little known about how to keep a bird healthy and how to extend longevity. Birds are pretty tricky, but if you really think about what a bird would be eating and doing in nature and try to bring that into your home, you will have a bird that is disease-free. Processed foods that you buy in regular stores are generally laced with chemicals, and birds are extremely sensitive to chemicals. Make sure that your bird gets plenty of fresh seeds and nuts on a daily basis. Herbs are important as well. I like this mix because it's loaded with everything: fruits, vegetables, seeds, and herbs. I started introducing whole grains for my big hook parrots. Brown rice, as an example, especially if it's organic, will supply your bird with B complex and the necessary fiber, so essential to keeping your bird's intestinal tract unclogged. If you feed rice, it's really important that you cook it well. Make sure that it's soft. Remember too that especially in good season, corn on the cob will provide lots of activity for your birds. Will exercise the jaw, but corn is a very toxic vegetable, so please be sure that you wash it properly or source organic corn. Every morning when I'm having my grapefruit, I juice for my bird Macmillan. I just squeeze out the juice. He gets his naturally occurring bioflavonoids and his vitamin C that way, as opposed to a synthetic vitamin or mineral, which really, in my opinion, is worthless because the birds have to expend so much energy to break the synthetic form of vitamin mineral down. It's so much better to just give it straight from the food. People often ask me, what do I do for snacks? How about organic popcorn? Your bird will love you for it. If you have a bird at home, you probably are using a cuttle bone. Now for my tiny little finch, I need to use the cuttle bone, although it's not natural, it's chemically treated, and I worry about that. That's the one exception, but he needs the calcium from it. But a big hook parrot, such as Macmillan, will drill out calcium sourced from a chicken bone, and that's a much better way of going than buying a synthetic source sprayed cuttle bone.
We've gone out to find those individuals who have taken control of a more natural approach to helping their pets. And that's what we're going to talk about now. We're going to talk with a whole variety of people. You'll see their pets, and you'll see the difference. You'll even see photographs before and after. So join us now for a very interesting part of this program. Kathy, tell us about Kishka.
4 years ago, Kishka was diagnosed with an autoimmune illness. Her white blood cell count was extremely high. It was killing off her red blood cells. So she was put on prednisone, which I guess is a normal treatment for this, and just didn't do well. Her hair coat became very brittle. She became bald, just listless. So I decided it was time to take a different approach and put her on holistic medicine, herbs and supplements.
And what happened?
Incredible difference. Within 6 months, she was completely off of prednisone. Her hair coat came back. She wasn't bald anymore. She was active, happy, bright. She's a new dog. Just amazing, the difference in her.
So homeopathy, a natural diet, vitamins, changed your dog's life.
Significantly. I truly believe that without it, she would have died.
I learned a powerful lesson in this with my horse Vivaldi, who had some problems in his shoeing and his feet that were a major problem and really should be fixed. Because he was in my mind sound, and in the mind of my current blacksmiths and vets he was sound, I didn't change it. Years down the road, he became practically crippled. He was lame at the walk and in a high degree of pain. This was when I started to bring him down to Dr. Shoemaker and in fact leave him there and begin major reconstruction on his feet and shoeing in conjunction with chiropractic, acupuncture, hydrotherapy, laser, magnetic, anything I could do in a positive way to help this horse. A year after that, he was working sound. Even before that, I brought him to Dr. Shoemaker, and 2 months later I picked him up and he was running around in a field. He now is being worked and ridden, and he not only is sound from these changes, but because he was in discomfort before and I couldn't recognize it, now that he's more comfortable, his attitude has changed. He's actually a younger, in many ways, horse than he was before. So at 17, he has more energy, more life, and is more comfortable than he ever has been.
Here is a 27-month-old West Highland White Terrier named Blake. When Blake came to our practice, he had been treated very responsibly by conventional medicine. He was highly allergic to several different things. One was wool, so all the carpets were taken out of the house. Grasses, fleas, molds. He was desensitized to what he was allergic to. That didn't bring him any relief. He was put on a lot of cortisone and antibiotics, shampoos. After all his medical therapy, he was suffering so badly that the conventional veterinarian that treated him very, very responsibly recommended euthanasia. We saw Blake. He was about 27, 28 months old, and we started him on a program where we worked on his metabolic system and his immune system, and we started healing Blake from inside out. The skin is nicknamed the third kidney. It's a powerful detoxifying organ, and one of its jobs is to get rid of poisons. What we did is, as we started working with Blake, he literally, over the first 3 months, went through one of these healing processes. He literally lost all the hair on his body. His skin turned very, very thickened and dark black, and he had welts all over. Because we highly trained the owner of Blake to expect this detoxification healing crisis, she persevered through it. And then here is Blake 9.5 months later. As you can see right here, the rugs have been returned to the house. And then here, 2.5 years later, and he actually entered the show ring and was winning ribbons. And you can see the grasses that he was also allergic to. In this picture, he was totally, totally off medication. This is an 11-year-old cat named Jupiter. And you're actually seeing Jupiter's eyes, the pupils of Jupiter's eyes, dilated widely open with no response to light flashed into him. Usually when you flash a light into an eye, the pupil should constrict. The reason that Jupiter's doesn't constrict is that in this picture over here, you can actually see the outer white surface is the skull, the inner black surface is the brain, and that white circle in the middle, all filled in, is Jupiter's brain tumor. It takes up between 1/3 and 1/2 of his entire brain, putting pressure on the nerves to the eye, causing the blindness. Jupiter was also convulsing. Jupiter, at the facility that Jupiter had his CAT scan, they refused to do surgery because the tumor was so big. The surgeon thought he would destroy the rest of the brain while trying to get the tumor out. They put Jupiter on cortisone, and his convulsions increased, and they recommended putting Jupiter to sleep. We started Jupiter on therapy, alternative therapy, took him off the drugs, and here is Jupiter 22 months later, 13.5 years old, with normal vision. Jupiter lived till be about 15 years of age and died of old age causes, not so much brain cancer. His symptoms of brain tumor never returned. Meet Whiskey. This is a 28-month-old dog who had a disease considered typically fatal to the Rottweiler. This dog, the owner of this dog, actually consulted 12 institutions, was treated by a really good conventional veterinarian. He had a condition called inflammatory bowel disease, which is becoming very, very common. But in the Rottweiler, it has another component called lymphangiectasia, which is a disruption of the normal lymph system, almost like a forerunner of lymph cancer. And when those two hit the Rottweiler, it's considered almost 100% fatal. After literally thousands of dollars worth of medical therapy, this dog was referred to me by the veterinarian. And even though he said this is 100% fatal, we really don't say no to any patient because we think every animal deserves a chance in our practice. So I had the veterinarian have the owners bring the dog in on Monday, and the veterinarian told me that Whiskey would be dead by Monday. He literally gave him less than 2 days to live. So they carried Whiskey in by stretcher, weighing, I think it was either 54 or 57 pounds, totally emaciated. And as you can see here in these pictures, he's just a breathing skeleton. We cold turkey Whiskey from all the drugs he was on. He was on many, many drugs. We usually don't cold turkey, but we had no other choice in Whiskey. We started alternative therapy, nutritional supplements, homeopathic remedies, injections of homeopathic remedies into acupuncture points. Here is Whiskey. Five weeks later, he responded dramatically. And honest to goodness, this is Whiskey. 3.5 months later, 2.5 years later. And Whiskey and I just appeared on Good Morning America. 6 years later, he weighs about 130, 135 pounds. So this is alternative therapy at its best, and including the healing crisis or the process that the body must go through in an attempt to get itself better. So here is actually Whiskey's bio-nutritional analysis. And through Whiskey's blood sample, we found out the values which are outside the normal range, the values which are inside the normal range reported by the laboratory, and those which are starting to get to the outside of each normal range, which also need nutraceutical complementation. Here is Whiskey's actual program, and as you can see here, we have each milligram of everything Whiskey needs: chromium, magnesium, adrenal, pancreas, stomach, thymus, determined by the bloods, determined by Whiskey's condition, but exactly to the milligram that Whiskey needs and how many times a day. And then all of this is put into one vacuum-sealed supplement. So instead of Whiskey in the old days had to take at least 10, 12, 14 different capsules at least 2 to 3 times a day, Whiskey is now getting just one powder with all the filler gone once or twice a day. And you saw the pictures of Whiskey before. He's 10 years old and he's doing phenomenally.
One of the things that really terrifies all pet owners is getting that call that your pet has a very serious or even life-challenging illness. You feel helpless. You don't know what to do, unless you're Juliet Hannon, then you decide, well, I'm going to ask a lot of questions. I'm going to find out if the diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment that I've been advised is the only one or necessarily the best one. Most people don't do that, and therefore they either succeed or fail based upon the advice and treatment they've been given. Juliet, explain about your pet here on the floor and when you found out that your pet had cancer.
Yes, Gary, it really is a shocking thing to be told that your pet has breast carcinoma and, in Gabby's case, locally aggressive sarcoma with some mitotic activity, which means they're growing, they're expanding. Her vet at Animal Medical Center said that it could be, she could go any time or she could live a few more months. It was a pretty bleak outlook.
And they were going to recommend some radical surgery.
They recommended complete removal of the tumors along with tissue. A pretty invasive thing. It would have meant all of her breasts would have been cut out. At the onset of what brought me to have her examined, she had this huge hard tumor, this one big hard tumor. And it was so hard, it felt like there was a stone under her fur. When it was diagnosed, a week later, there were all of a sudden more tumors, small, piercing tumors, just beneath her skin and into some of her breast tissue. You could feel them. They were hard as rocks. And there were numerous tumors like that. And there was one on one of her paws that was growing and spreading her paw. It was in the muscle tissue. This is how aggressive cancer is. It was growing at such a rate that it was spreading her paw. She was limping, and it was going to break her bones. So that's what I was faced with at the onset of this diagnosis. That's what it looked like. Not to mention mucus coming out of her eyes, complete inability to walk, no energy, cold stools, emotionally very not bright and happy anymore. She just seemed like she was pulling out of her life. Like it was strange to watch her. She's only 8, going on 8.5, and so that was what it was before.
What are those symptoms like today?
Today, her eyes are bright and clear. There's no more mucus coming out of her eyes. Her paw is back to normal. She's jumping, running. Her energy's come back. She can run again. I know I mentioned that before, that she runs, and it's a program. She used to run 4 miles during this whole treatment in cancer. She had no running at all. I would be lucky if I could walk her around the block. And now she's running 4 miles some days, 6 miles, and of course it's not continuous yet, but it's at least broken up with points of rest, and eventually I'm sure she'll be running like she was before, just continuous.
What about the tumors?
Tumors are, the vast majority of them on the 8 breasts are gone. They're gone. There's nothing left. It's a clean, flat surface, and you can still see it because she was shaved 3 months ago, and that's where they were, most of them, and now there's nothing there. What the program looks like is, first of all, I chose to opt with a non-invasive approach, as I mentioned earlier, which is pretty extensive. It means a lot of preparation of foods and juicing and applying supplements. So in the morning she'll have an ounce of Essiac tea that is administered. I do it through a needleless syringe, and Katie, one of my good friends and one of the caretakers for Gabby, we share those responsibilities, and it's just the Essiac tea is given in the morning and at night on an empty stomach. And the IP6 that we're using has the inositol combo, and then that follows with a juice, preferably a green juice. Lots of beet, carrot, and green. Now it's mostly greens. And followed by that is her first meal. Her first meal consists of sprouts and avocado and garbanzo. Everything's been raw, mostly raw, coupled with a very extensive amount of vitamins. And these vitamins include astragalus complex, CoQ10, MGN3, some of the Thorne veterinary animal products, NAC. There's so many supplements. There's a bowl of supplements that she takes, followed by yet another juice. She has a mid-afternoon meal that's organic raw chicken livers, nice and bloody, with crushed chopped pieces of broccoli. Again, with another supplement, more supplements added in. This is what the sequence looks like throughout the day. And then in the later part of the evening, she'll have, again, 2 IP6, which are, again, cancer, tumor, they inhibit growth, followed by more Essiac tea on an empty stomach. And that's what her day looks like.
The radiance technique is an ancient form of touch healing, and in addition to all of the supplements that Gabby receives, she also gets Reiki treatments both in the morning and at night, pretty much every day. And I'm doing it right now with my left hand. Juliet is also a Reiki master, and we've been treating her the whole time. She's had all those tumors on her stomach, and many of them are gone now. And the touch healing is simple. It's just a matter of touching wherever it is that you want to touch. And the white light energy just responds to the heat, the person, so it'll adjust to Gabby and what her needs are. And it's been used for over 10,000 years and is recognized by the AMA as an adjunct healing technique. And yeah, she's just eaten, so she sometimes, yeah, you want it over there. It makes her warm. I give you a little Reiki, huh? Yes, dear, yes.
It's estimated this year upwards of 20 million cats and dogs will be euthanized. Now, of course, some of those are very ill and have no choice. But how many animals are euthanized simply because they were abandoned or given up and there's no one else to take them? That's unfortunate. We'd like to see that stopped. And to help us understand what you need to know to have a pet in your life is the person who on a day-to-day basis really runs the ASPCA in New York City. He is Steve Musso. Nice to have you with us, Steve.
Pleasure.
Steve, what should a person know before adopting a pet?
Well, everybody in the household needs to be committed of having a new dependent in the household. They all need to take on the responsibility and assist in the caring and the maintaining of that pet. And they all really need to understand that it's a lifetime commitment of the pet. So if you're talking about a pocket pet, several years. If you're talking about adopting a cat, maybe 15 years or upward. If it's a parrot, it's over 50 years.
Sometimes a child will say, oh, I've got to have that. They'll go see 101 Dalmatians and say, I've got to have a Dalmatian. But we have to start to match who we are as individuals with the type of pet. An older person would have a different pet possibly than a younger person, a person that's not active versus a very active person. A family might have a different type of pet than a single person. Tell us what we should know.
Well, you probably first off should take the time, go to the library, go to the bookstore, and find out about the specific animal you're interested in. If you want a dog, you may be looking for a specific breed of dog because you want one that's going to fit in your household. If you have children, for instance, young children, a pug or a Clumber Spaniel, Field Spaniel, Greyhound should be all right. Some of the retrievers, they're great pets for young kids, especially because they're sturdier, they're insensitive to being bashed around like a little kid could do. With an older person or the elderly, then you're looking at trying to place a quieter animal, a poodle, many of the toy breeds, but not necessarily the hyper terriers. Basset actually will work for both young and old. But you really want to learn about the breed first. You may decide on one breed, and then once you've gone through the education process, you'll find that another breed would be better for you.
What about cats?
Well, cats, I mean, people say, oh, they're easy to maintain. They still need to have their litter box changed. They still need to be fed. You still need to give them lots of affection, and they look for it. But no, do you take them outside and walk them? No. So there's more of your activity is done inside with the cat as opposed to a dog.
Some people don't like to spay their cats or dogs. Why should they?
Oh my God, they need to. The overpopulation problem is a big issue in the United States and beyond. 5 to 20 million animals are being euthanized each year. We need to stop putting animals back into the system. I mean, we're asking people to come to our shelters to adopt animals because they are the unwanted. People have surrendered them for a host of different reasons, some legitimate, some not. But if you add to the problem, more animals are going to be euthanized.
Now, when you get cats in here, why do people give their cats up?
everything from their landlord is evicting them, they found out they have the cat, they're not allowed to keep the cat anymore, to allergies, we get a lot of that. This cat, Mao, I just learned, was brought in after 7 loyal years. It's like turning in a child after 7 years, because the owner had a baby, and the baby has allergies.
Oh, that must have been very difficult.
I'm sure, and I'm sure the owner was probably very upset and sad, but, you know, he's a beautiful, affectionate, wonderful 7-year-old, and adult cats make just as wonderful companions as kittens.
Okay, now, Steve, we have all these dogs. Why do people give up their dogs?
Oh, multiple of reasons. Some dogs are returned because of allergies. The biggest known reason that people return animals is because of behavior, litter training in cats, and housebreaking.
Okay, now, what are the primary breeds that end up being brought back? Most of these tend to be the larger dogs. Is that
popular breed is pit bulls. So we're seeing the pit bull and the pit bull mixes. Although they can be a great pet, if raised incorrectly, are difficult to handle. They have a very high prey drive. They're very dog aggressive, which goes back to what they originally bred for, was fighting. Actually, pit bulls are funny. You hear about all these incidences with pit bulls, but more people are bit by Cocker Spaniels, Chihuahuas, the smaller breeds, but because the bite is insignificant, or I should say minor.
Well, let me ask something, Steve. If you had a choice of having a little miniature Chihuahua bite your leg or a pit bull, which is going to be?
Oh, yes. I'm not going to argue.
One of the things I've seen is that with conventional therapy, you do get symptom relief, but you also get the chemical put in the body. And there are so many nutraceutical medicinal effects of products that don't contain chemicals. We just don't need a lot of chemicals put into bodies to make better. I think one of the pinnacles of that is we should not and do not need something like Prozac for dogs. There are rescue remedies, flower essences, homeopathic calming essences. There is melatonin, herbal extracts, ignatia, valerian root that have the same calming effects, St. John's wort. And you just don't need, I personally do not like Prozac. I've done a lot of studies on what Prozac does to people, the suicide rates of people on Prozac, and especially trying to come off Prozac. And animals that can't really communicate well to you, who knows what they're feeling when you give it to them or you miss their dose. I just don't think it's a good thing to do when there are so many other ways of getting animals better and healthy. And one of the things that has been documented by Dr. Gene Dodds is an aggressive attitude that is created by a condition called autoimmune thyroiditis. And it causes aggression, and it is caused by vaccination. And if you take these young animals that are really aggressive and you're ready to put them on Prozac or to euthanize them, you test their thyroid levels, especially their autoimmune reaction to their own thyroid. And if it comes out positive and you just treat the thyroid, they immediately become non-aggressive. So there are many other ways to get animals non-aggressive without the use of a harsh psychotic drug like Prozac.
What we're hoping to get out of this, or trying to correct, is Zoe's tendency towards chaotic behavior.
Okay. I'm going to teach her manners. I'm also going to teach her how to learn how to break some habits, because she has some habits now with you. Just having this on a dog's neck, just think of this too. Every time she moves her neck, she gets discomfort. Her skin is actually pinched. Okay? Right. So that's very discomforting to a dog. So we're going to get rid of that. We're going to get rid of the regular collar too. I can't stop all the distractions. I can't say, squirrels go away, pigeons go away, stop running, my dog's here. Stop the traffic. We can't do that, okay? But we can control our dog. I praise the dog all the time. If they do something wrong, then I discipline them. Think of this discipline. No, that lasts a second. So let's say I disciplined her 20 times in an hour. That's 20 seconds, okay, out of 60 minutes. Okay, the rest of the time will actually be praised. That's not too bad. Our goal is we should be able to walk her and we shouldn't be able to correct her. If we can do that, that means she's smarter than me. And that's what I want. I want her to be smarter than me. No? Hi, babe. Who's a good baby, huh? No? Hiya. If you notice, if she gets ahead of me, I give her a correction and I tell her no for making the leash tight. That's all I'm doing, okay? Because if she gets ahead of me and we're walking north and I pull back on this, she's gonna actually pull me even further. There's nothing wrong with discipline. We learn from it, as long as we understand it and it doesn't hurt us. The two factors we have to remember. Now, did you ever see people walk their dogs and they're saying heel?
Yeah.
Okay, that's terrible to do. What you're trying to do is make a soldier out of your dog.
Right.
I want your dog to enjoy the walk. I want your dog to understand the walk. Plus, I don't want you to walk every 2 steps and say, heel, heel, heel. You'll look like a goof on the street. We're not going to use strength at all. If we use strength, we're going to hurt your dog. Plus, we're going to confuse your dog. Because if I use strength and pull back, your dog's going to want to go forward. One finger you could use. There's no strength involved at all. If you use strength, you're going to lose. No strength at all. And when I do it, I just say no. Okay? Sometimes when she's doing good, I talk nice to her and I say, hi, baby, how you doing? So she doesn't hear the chain. Okay, she has 6 feet of leash. See how close she is to me? She's feeling more confident with me. If your dog does something wrong, I'm gonna go like that and tell your dog no. Okay? When your dog's doing good, I'm gonna praise your dog and say, hey, good girl, good girl, good girl. I'm not gonna use their name at all. The only time you should use their name is when you talk nice to them and you praise them. Unless you have more than one dog, because then if you say come, they'll all come to you and you might want to be specific. You'll read in a lot of books where you have to be the alpha, the leader, you have to show your dog you're more dominant, you're in control. No, we don't want that. We want a team, a partnership.
Millions of Americans own fish. Unfortunately, a lot of those same fish owners end up giving it up. Why? Well, to show you what you can do so your fish can live long lives, I've invited Seth Kolker. Seth is one of the directors of the Brooklyn Aquarium Society that represents people who are interested in fish. Nice to have you with us, Seth.
Nice to be here, Gary.
In case someone's not all that experienced, may not know everything about setting up the tank right and have the best filtration system, which are the more delicate fish that are more likely to have problems and which are the ones that can survive?
The ones like the cichlids are very hardy. You're dealing with angelfish, maybe some Oscars and other fish like that. But make sure your tank is big enough to accommodate these fish. One of the stress factors that people encounter is they buy these small fish and they don't ask their storekeeper, how big does that fish grow? And they put in these small fish in the tank and at first they all get along great, but eventually they get big and they eat up the other fish.
How much room does a fish need?
They need about, they say 1 inch of fish for every gallon of water. But that's a very, very general. With saltwater fish, it's even less than that.
When purchasing your specimens, it's important to have a small checklist of things to look out for. Make sure that there are no fungal infections around the mouth, no erosion. Make sure the eyes are crystal clear and not bulging. The scales are in good condition and are flat against the body. Make sure that the fins are nice and full and not clamped against the body. And no signs of just general disease. No spots, ulcers, hemorrhaging, or mucus slime around the body. The fish feces should always be in good condition, not stringy. And the belly should never be bloated, slightly convex or flat. As far as the gills are concerned, it's important to make sure that they're not red and that the fish is breathing at a normal respiratory rate. No worms or mucus around the gills, also important to check for.
Nancy Chambers, owner of Urban Bird here in New York City. What should people know before buying a bird?
The kind of bird that you're going to want to buy is going to be dependent on you. The smallest child can handle the largest macaw if it is raised properly. So you're going to find that you walk into the very, very reputable bird store or other really good pet shop that sells birds, and you're going to find that some little bird or some large bird comes over to you, runs up your arm and kisses you on the cheek. That's going to be the bird that you want. I very often tell people that the bird picks the person. Very much like with kittens and puppies. You are going to be attracted to a bird or a type of bird and do a little bit of research, find out what kind you think you like, and that bird's going to find you.
How long do birds live?
Parrot species birds, in particular, can have a human lifespan. Now I'm going to say that the smaller parrots in the cockatiel, lovebird, budgie variety will live 10 to 15 years, maybe 20. But the bigger, medium to bigger sized birds are going to live anywhere from 20 to 100 years. So it's a lifetime commitment. It is a long-term commitment. I tell people that it's not a good idea to think of some kind of bird as a starter bird. You really want to do a little bit of research because you're going to have a friend for the rest of your life, most likely.
I don't think people appreciate, Nancy, how much love a bird can give and how much love they want.
Yeah, it's really unusual because people think, most people in the street that have had a dog or a cat think of birds, or parrots especially, as like a fish. You put it in the cage, you put it in the tank. You look at it, you feed it, you clean it, and that's it. This is totally untrue. These birds are totally social. They want to be with you, and they look at you as either their mom and dad, their brother and sister, or their boyfriend and girlfriend. So they establish human relationships with people, including establishing different relationships with different people in the house. Very interesting.
Over the years, I found a tremendous correlation between owners, how they look, and their pets, how they look, and also in reference to disease. It is not really airy-fairy stuff or hocus pocus. There is an energy field that surrounds each body. If we were to photograph with using an infrared camera, it's called Kirlian photography, a human patient or a human being and an animal, we would see two overlapping energy fields. Within these energy fields, there is a correspondence or a transfer of energy. If you were to hold your hand around a piece of cold metal without touching it, you would heat that metal. That is energy that's being emitted from your body. Studies have been made showing that the energy fields are more bright and brilliant in people that are happy and darker and dimmer in people that are depressed. Inside the disease state, there is a lot of emotional depression, low tone feelings. And I feel that this definitely has an additive effect and is part of the disease complex. And the quote unquote coincidence that I've seen over the years between problems that pet owners have associated with their pets is just astoundingly beyond coincidence. So we do a lot of work with our clients in trying to get them into a positive mode. We show them a lot of before and after pictures of successful cases. Especially when you're dealing with cancer, there's a lot of gloom and hopelessness. And it's amazing how many times we will see an animal for the first time with terminal cancer, and all we'll do is take blood samples and show the owners before and after pictures. They walk into our facility very, very depressed, and they walk out very happy, and they call 2 days later to get the blood results and to start the program, and invariably, so many times, the animals are already better, and all we did was change a viewpoint around. It's really, really important.
One of the things I advocate, and I certainly suggest people consider, is quality bonding time every day with your pet. I have some miniature long-haired Dachshunds, and when my first one was born, and after she was weaned, I made a little pocket right here at my heart chakra, and I'd keep her in here so that she had the heart energy, and every time she'd look up and I'd look down, I'd nuzzle her nose and give her hugs and kisses.
Oh, that's so wonderful.
And every day, no matter what I'm doing, I spend time bonding with her. Now, in turn, she's always relaxed, she doesn't get hyper, she hasn't been sick.
You know, there's a protocol out there called Tellington Touch, which is what you're aptly describing, about touching the animals and rubbing their ears, etc., and even going down their back and taking the tail and going out the tail, taking the energy out of the dog, around, from the tail and out into the ethers, if you will. But yes, there's no question that this daily massage and daily touching, and I might add, most people will buy a bird. We'll get back to birds for just a second here. Most people will buy a bird because, you know, they're lovely and they make a lot of wonderful sounds and, you know, good conversation piece, but they don't pay any attention to the birds. Of all of the pets, the birds need the most attention. And when they don't get the attention, what do we end up with? Feather plucking many times. And you see a bird that looks like he's naked because he's emotionally stressed out, and one of the things that's bothering him is the fact he doesn't get any attention. So those of you who raise birds or have birds as pets, make sure you spend plenty of time with them, talking to them and holding them and touching them. It's very, very important. And don't human beings respond to touch too? Sure. I think that's so wonderful. You're talking about your heart chakra and how that little fellow or girl or whatever it was responded, because I see that animals, for instance, who are into seizures, animals that have epileptic seizures, the first thing I tell the people to do is wrap them up in a towel and talk to them and pet them and comfort them and give them your energy.
Animals also are just as susceptible as humans to stress.
Yes, you know, I find stress an important part of my practice, the way I practice veterinary medicine. When you're stressed, you're sick, and when you're sick, you're stressed. We just don't get away from it all, particularly in today's pressure cooker society that we live in. So when these animals come in, they not only have the diseases that they're afflicted with, but they have tremendous stresses involved. And a lot of the stresses they have are from the household itself. And you'll have a family that's always squabbling, or you'll have kids that just don't know how to handle the animals. They're always threatening them or doing something that they shouldn't be doing. You have arguments going on. You have all of the things in the American family today that are stressful and creating problems for the humans, and it rubs right off on the animals. You can see it all the time. Oh. I address stress because I use a lot of Bach flowers. Have you ever heard of Bach flowers, Gary?
Sure.
Well, I use Bach flowers. Every animal that comes into my practice, I assume he's stressed. Because I'm stressed, why shouldn't he be stressed? And I'm at least taking care of myself by using the proper foods every day.
Explain what a Bach flower remedy is and how people can use it.
Sure. Well, there was a Dr. Edwin C. Bach who passed away around 1936. He was an English homeopathic physician. And in the latter years of his life, he got into botanicals. And he developed 38 different essences, if you will, extracts from flowers, which had effects on the human psyche relative to relieving the stresses of daily life, the pressures, what the pressures created. Now, these are not Valiums. These are not Prozacs. These are not those horrible things that are used today, these antidepressants. These were natural things. You can't OD on a flower petal, I always tell everybody. And these various Bach flowers, just like 3 drops 3 times a day, either on their ear or in their mouth, will settle them down from the standpoint of loss of a loved one such as a long-time illness as the result of some surgery that they had, an animal that is always fearful of thunder and lightning, for instance. Bach flowers are wonderful. Animals that scratch all the time. There's a Bach flower called agrimony, or maybe it's agrimony. I've never known how to pronounce it. But that does a great job on animals that have that creepy crawly feeling under the skin and makes them itch. So it's great for allergies. It's not the answer, but you have to help these animals as they're being treated. You want to know that if you address the stress, whatever else you're doing in the way of medical treatment, whether it be allopathic or holistic or whatever, whatever you're doing is going to work better when the stress level has been reduced. And I just see people telling me all the time, I just can't believe how these animals are responding compared to what they used to. I haven't necessarily cured them, of course, with Bach flowers, but I've put them on a road of quality life at that time.
One of the things I advocate, and I certainly suggest people consider, it's my belief that we should not be having just one pet. I've seen the difference when you have one cockatoo or one parakeet or one macaw or one dog or cat. The time you have to spend with them is tremendous, and when you're not there, they go through anxiety, separation anxiety. Having more than one allows them to bond and play and enjoy each other's company. What are your feelings on this?
Oh, I tell you, I've said this for many, many years, and I always tell people, have more than one. Visualize yourself. Put yourself in the pet's position. Pets are man's best friend. They're very social. They're very gregarious. And to be by yourself hour after hour, and you can't even turn on the TV set. So all you can do is just sit there, and then if you get an itch, you start nibbling, and then the nibbling becomes worse, and then you've got a sore, etc. So you end up with these animals with skin problems because they're by themselves, and there's nothing better to do than let's chew them myself. And animals that have nervous stomachs. I get to be simplistic, but nevertheless, animals with bowel diseases because they're upset, they're nervous, and they're in a state of stress.
It's not possible in the limitations of just this program to give you everything you need to know about how to care for and feed and maintain or purchase a pet. But I know we've hit upon the most important points. There are a lot of good resources, a lot of good books, and I know that you'll start to study those as well. I'm Gary Knoll. Thank you very much for watching.